Hi, this is Paul. Just wanted to have a little short comment on the Inside the Intellectual Dark Web, Eric Weinstein video that David just posted. David Fuller of our Rebel Wisdom just posted up this morning. I think David is doing us all a great service by getting this content out. He's obviously doing a ton of interviews, and I really applaud him for the work that he's doing. One of the things, if you watch this video, you should pay attention to is how Eric Weinstein talks about institutions and the IDW. The interesting move that Eric made when he coined the term the IDW, and as he's continued to use the term, and as both he and David use the term throughout this video, is to think about what institutions are. Now, marriage is an institution, and states and other entities, including churches, interact with that institution. Institutions are not just organizations that have org charts and CEOs and buildings and budgets and those things. Institutions are also these things that develop in our thought that have an identity of their own. And so in that sense, Eric Weinstein is the originator of the IDW, and actually coining that phrase and creating that mental, very lightweight mental institution was a brilliant move for him in a sense. I'm not saying he's disingenuous or that was anything wrong with it, but he created an institution as such. Now, when you listen to him talk about institutions, he'll talk about the members of the IDW as being disagreeable, which I think is true, as being able to hold their own opinions in a room against others, which I think is also true. But I think as I listened to this and I listened to it again, I wondered how nuanced his thinking is about institutions, because institutions are not just organizations, as I said, with budgets and buildings and corporate structures. Institutions are also things like marriage, things like family. IDW is, in a sense, an institution. And when he coined that phrase and termed that group, he created, in a sense, an institution. So listen to the video and listen to the ways he talks about the IDW and kind of the two sides he flips back and forth on in institutions. And I think if he would do perhaps a little bit more thinking, or it could just be the conversation too, I would like to have seen a little bit more nuance and understanding about institutions, because again, every time he uses that phrase IDW, he is making an institutional move. All right. And one of the things I think we will need moving forward as a society is to have do better thinking about institutions and what I would call confessions, which are the content of our beliefs. A lot of this emerged in the Protestant Reformation, this confessional age. And even though I loved his insight that identity is cheaper than labor in terms of the Democratic Party, I thought that was a brilliant insight that he got from his wife. And I'm going to take that away from this interview as something that I kind of tuck in my shirt pocket and remember for another day. But I think moving forward, we're going to have to think more carefully about how institutions function. I think it was Oz Guinness that had the quote, and Andy Crouch, who's former editor of Christianity Today, who has done a lot of thinking about power and institutions. Without individuals, nothing changes. Without institutions, nothing lasts. And so going forward, we're going to need to think about institutions. Some of Eric's comments about Donald Trump, I thought were right on, probably politically. I don't know. I don't know where he's at politically, but you know, part of what Trump has done is break institutions, and I agree also quite often with David Brooks that, and also with a lot of the commentary after the George W. Bush funeral, that we have to think about institutions, and we have to think about how to preserve them. And I also think that Jordan Peterson is correct, because institutions often tend towards corruptions, especially the ones with organizational charts and brick and mortar. But these non how do I describe it? These thought institutions that we have, like marriage, these identity institutions, these categorical institutions, they're less prone to corruption, and we're going to have to think how to talk about them and nuance them and use them as we think about how groups relate, because there's something deeply There's something deeply connected between these kinds of institutions and groups. Again, when he coined the term IDW, he created an institution that essentially identified a group, and now he spends a lot of time, and David Fuller has been working on this too, who's in, who's out of this institution, what is this institution about? And again, because Eric coined the term, he in a sense is the CEO of this institution. It in a sense belongs to him. You can think about perhaps the Inklings as C.S. Lewis's friendship group that had Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Owen Barfield and Charles Williams and a number of intellectuals of that era. So again, watch the video, think about institutions, listen carefully to the way Eric talks about institutions, how he talks about the IDW. I'd like to see him clean that up.